No mistake about it. Ice is cold. Roses are red. I'm in love. And this love is about to carry me off somewhere. Well, so it goes in this novel, Sputnik Sweetheart, a story of love, of distance, and the spaces between souls. Today, I want to tell you a love story of my own, of a love that carried me off somewhere. Today, we'll go on that journey guided by someone special. And our guide today is the author of those words, Japanese novelist Haruki Murakami. And before we set off, let's just get to know him a little bit. Some of you may know this face or this name already, probably from one of his more than 20 published novels. Murakami has been writing since 1979. He is the most widely read Japanese novelist of his generation. Murakami's breakthrough work, Norwegian Wood, was sold more than 2 million copies in Japan alone. That's the equivalent of one for every household in Tokyo. But his books have traveled much further than that, having been translated into over 50 languages, including into Latvian, with more than 15 of his works translated here over the past 20 years. I think this is great. I visited the wonderful Latvian National Library with my family earlier this week, and I discovered that here in Riga, we're celebrating the 500th anniversary of the first book ever printed in Latvian. And I think as Rubyists, we would all appreciate the value of nurturing small languages. Across all of his books, Murakami's writing blends the surreal with the everyday. These are quiet, strange stories where the real action isn't what happens, but how it changes you. These are stories that kind of sneak up on you emotionally. And as I read some Murakami, what snuck up on me the most, however, wasn't one of his works of fiction, but rather his memoir, where he shares his passion for long-distance running and its parallels with his life as a writer. Now, when I read this book, what struck me the most was just how open and plain-speaking Murakami was throughout it. Here he was, this literary giant, writing without pretense, showing us his own flawed humanity through the very personal account of his ups and downs of his running and his writing across the decades. And it has been many decades. Murakami has been long-distance running almost as long as he's been writing. He started in 1982, at the same time he decided to go full-time as a writer. And he started running with a simple goal, one that I'm sure we could all identify with, simply to improve his physical health and to create a healthy routine to structure his days. And after he started, he never stopped. 40 years have gone by, and Murakami still runs every day. And across his life, he's run a marathon at least once a year. Running became so core to Murakami's identity that it became the overarching theme of his memoir. He called it What I Talk About When I Talk About Running. And today, I'll follow in this spirit, and I will share what I talk about when I talk about Ruby. You see, Murakami's memoir was so inspiring to me that I wanted to follow its format for our chat today. I want to tell you some of my story, to speak to you as plainly and as personally as I can. And as I go, I'll share some parallels that I found striking between Murakami's life and the life that I've lived in Ruby Open Source. And here's what Ruby Open Source looks like to me. Today, I lead these 3 projects. Hanami, a complete app framework for Ruby. Dry, a collection of gems solving common tasks. And ROM, a powerful and flexible persistence toolkit. Now, if you've seen these before, it's likely because you've ventured somewhat outside of the Ruby and Rails mainstream. And it's true, it's fair to say these tools have been countercultural. And much of it is by design, because my teammates and I built these knowing that we wanted to see something different in Ruby. And as we shared these over the years, we certainly met some resistance along the way. And here I was struck by another aspect of Murakami's life. This man, who's been called one of the world's greatest living novelists, could also have his work roundly criticized at the same time. You see, while Murakami did attract many fans and many readers in Japan, on the other hand, the Japanese literary establishment, the critics and the other writers, they would call out his work as being un-Japanese. And this would lead to Murakami at one point calling himself a black sheep of the Japanese literary world. Now, as someone building Ruby tools that push against the status quo, yeah, this black sheep feeling really hit me. And when I look back, I realize I've been a Ruby black sheep for 10 years now, from the moment I started building these tools back in 2015. Those 10 years ago, I reached what felt like a point of stagnation in my life as a Rails developer. I could tell I wasn't growing or learning in the way that I wanted to anymore. The Ruby I had been writing no longer felt right for me. I knew I needed some kind of change to break out of that rut and to reach my next level as a developer. Now, at this time, it was popular for Rubyists to go and leave for languages like Elixir, which were new and upcoming and shiny. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to stay with Ruby because I love Ruby. And yes, this is the love story I promised you in the beginning. You see, I got lucky and found Ruby all the way back in 2002 as a kid just hunting around for like new obscure languages to play with. And I've been using it ever since. I loved Ruby and I didn't want to leave. So at this moment, what I did was look around for the other black sheep in the Ruby world to see what they were doing and to see if I could join in. And it was this that changed my world. It was this that carried me off somewhere. What I found in those other black sheep were the seeds of what became, after 10 years of work, the Hanami Dry and ROM projects that we have today. So today we'll look at where we can go from here. And in proper memoir style, we'll split this into chapters. In chapter 1, I'll share what you need to know to become a running Hanami developer. In chapter 2, I'll look at the evolution that Hanami can bring to Ruby and why I think it's essential. And then in chapter 3, I'll share what I'm going to do to make that happen. So let's get started. I think we need to change the mood here, band. What do you reckon? I reckon we need to lace up our shoes, follow in Murakami's footsteps, and hit the road. It's time for us to run a race. And learning Hanami will be the race we run today. It'll be a race towards a different style of Ruby. Now, on starting races, Murakami wrote, "The first few miles are always a test. I'm nervous, but I know that if I just keep moving forward, I'll settle into a rhythm. I always do." So today we're going to see some Ruby that might look unfamiliar to some of you. This will be its own kind of test. But don't worry, I know that you'll move forward and settle into a rhythm here too. So we'll start by installing Hanami and then running Hanami new to create a new app. And for today, we'll call this one Bookshop. And then we can hop inside and run Hanami Dev to start our development server. And then here we're greeted with this lovely welcome screen, helping us access everything we need to get started with our app. And we can start by checking the app class itself. And this is nice and simple. We won't need to spend too long here. But there is one thing to point out, and it's that all the app code in Hanami lives inside a single namespace here, matching the app's namespace. So here we have module Bookshop. This is the module all our code will live within. And from the app, we can move over to the routes. And we see here we have the first step we need to take. To make our app real, we need to add some kind of route to serve requests. To do this, we can generate an action. And Hanami gives us a friendly generator we can use. So let's go ahead and make an action now for our products index. And we see here the generator has made a new app for us. And this looks sensible. A get request to products will take us through to that products index action. And here's the action our generator made. And the thing to know about actions in Hanami is that they're the parts of our app that are responsible for handling our HTTP interactions. And we have exactly one action per endpoint. And it's this handle method inside the action where we put our logic, tell it how to behave. And we work here with the request and response objects that we're given. But this empty starter action is already enough because by default, it renders a matching view. And here's that view now. Just like actions, every view in Hanami comes with its own class. And the job of the view class is to prepare exposures. These expose the values that we want to use inside the view's template. So in this case, for a products index view, we'll want an array of products. But where do we put that logic, the job of fetching the products from the database? Well, to do this, we can get to know one of Hanami's most important features. And that is, in Hanami, our app is also a container. And a container here works as a central organizing object that's responsible for loading and managing access to all the components in our app. Our view is already a component, and we can fetch it from the app like this, using a key that matches its name. And then what we get back is an instance of this view ready to work with. In fact, any class that we put into app will be made available as a component. So in our case now, let's go ahead and make a component for a product repo. This can return that list of products for our view to use. And then once again, we have another generator that can take care of this for us. And here's how this repo looks. Now we can add a method inside to find and return the latest products from our database. Here we get to work with a full-powered API that lets us construct any query to our liking. So now we have two components created. We have our view and we have our repo. But how do we get them to know about each other? What we really want to do is use this repo inside our view. Well, for this, we can use Hanami's deps mixin. We can include this mixin inside any class in a Hanami app and then pass a list of component names that we want to have as dependencies. Deps here being our shorthand for dependencies. And those components then become available as instance methods that we can use wherever we need inside our class. This is classical dependency injection, just made easy and low friction by the framework. And using deps like this is central to how we can create high-level behavior by bringing together a range of smaller, focused components. This is an example of what Gavin shared in his brilliant talk before. Objects collaborate to become more than they are separately. So in this case, it means we can now expose the latest products from our product repo dependency and make them available to our template. And then inside, we can work with those products as we need to prepare our HTML. So with that done, we can now run our Hanami server, make a request, and we see we have our products returned to us as HTML. So now we've made our first working feature with Hanami. Well done, everybody. And what this means is that we're now fully into this race. And here, Murakami would write, after running for a while, your muscles sort of forget what they're doing. You don't have to think. You just become the act of running. So let's now become the act of building up our app and learn a few more essential Hanami features. And we can start by looking at the testing experience. How can we test this view we just created? Well, like every part of Hanami, views are designed to be directly testable. We can call new directly on our view and even pass in a test double for that product repo dependency, inject a mock object. This will let us control its behavior for the purposes of this test. And already that's enough for us to go ahead, call the view, and assert that its output meets our expectations. Now, what we're seeing here is a low-level, isolated test. And for most views or actions, we won't need to go this far. A more helpful approach would be to make an integrated end-to-end test, something that calls our app from the outside, like a feature spec. And these are available in every new Hanami app. But the thing to take away from this here is that because all Hanami objects are designed to be directly testable, just like this, it means we get to make the best testing choice for every situation. So we've interacted with our code through tests now. We can also interact with it inside the console. And in the console, we can use this app shortcut to get to our app, and from there, we can access our components, which come back as instances ready for us to interact with in the REPL. Now, one component that Hanami gives us by default are our settings. Oh, jaunty settings music. These are the values that we give our app to make sure it runs correctly in each environment. Things like keys, secrets, and flags. We can declare our settings here. Say we wanted to send emails when new products are created using a third-party email service. Well, here we can create a setting for its API key. And we can declare that settings type. This ensures we never boot our app into an unpredictable state. These settings are then loaded from matching environment variables, and after that, we can access those settings as just another component anywhere in our app using the settings name. And we can access each setting confidently by using their own methods. Now, aside from settings, so far we've only seen the components loaded from classes in our app directory. But what about components that might need some kind of special handling as part of their setup? This is where providers help. And we need to make one now for our email service. We've already created the setting for its API key. Now we need to go and use it. Providers have their own folder in config, and you can think of these as kind of like supercharged Rails initializers. Here we're registering our email service provider. And in the provider, we have a range of lifecycle steps we can work across. So we can start here by requiring the gem for our third-party email service, and then grab our API key from the settings component that we just worked with, pass it in to configure the email client as an instance, and that means we can then register that configured email client as a component in our app using the email service key. And what this means is that any class using email service as a dependency will get this fully configured client instance that we've just set up here. Now, by this point, we've covered nearly everything we need to know about Hanami apps. But there is one more important thing for us to discover, and that's slices. Slices help us organize our app into separate domains or technical concerns. They're a fantastic way for introducing modularity and clearer internal boundaries to our app as it grows. Now, you won't see slices in a brand new Hanami app, and that's because we chose to keep that first run experience as simple as possible. But they are built in, and they'll appear as soon as we start putting any code into the slices directory. And Hanami can help us with its slice generator. So let's go and make an admin slice now. This will prepare a slice directory for us, and then we can put our own code inside. So in this case, let's pretend we're making a product's create action. Just like our app, every slice maps to a single Ruby namespace. So here we're working within admin. Hanami will prepare a slice class that we can use inside that namespace, and that slice class works exactly like our app, offering access to components, with the only difference being that it's confined to the components from within its own slice directory. And also, just like the app, slices have their own deps mixin, with the same restriction. It only injects the components from inside its own slice. So now we've seen that both the app and slices act as containers for our individual components. And then, thanks to the deps mixin, we can clearly recognize the relationships between those components and begin to visualize our app as a sensible, understandable, big directed graph. Well, from there, we can take things one step further because slices can import components from other slices, which means that we can also envision an equally clear graph of all of our app's high-level concerns. This is a really powerful approach. Here we have the tools built right into the framework to help us organize our code at every level for easier understanding and maintainability. Slices also give us flexibility around our operations because we can configure which slices we want to load for each specific deployment of our app. So now we know everything we need to know about Hanami's features, and that means we can head to the finish line. And here we have some more words from Murakami. He said, "I didn't care what place I finished. I didn't care about the time. Just making it to the end, still running, meant everything." You see, in these large running races, it's rarely about the other competitors. It's about meeting your own goals instead. And Murakami's goal here was to make sure he ran at every point of the race, no matter how tired he got. And we can continue to run here too, to expand on our app that we've been building and get it closer to having a well-rounded feature. These next steps that I'll share are the same that I've been taking when I build production apps like this over the last 10 years. There's some really simple patterns that have held true over this whole time. So let's look at it. We'll start again with actions, as they are the outermost layer in our app. Now, we built a read action before for that products index, and it didn't really have to do anything. So this time around, we'll make an update action and implement some of our own HTTP logic. We do want every action to be as thin as possible though, so the first thing we do here is bring a dependency from inside our app. So here we'll bring in an operation object whose job it is to update a product. Then inside the actions handle method, we'll call this operation, passing in the product ID and the params from the request. Then we'll go to work on its result. For a success, we can redirect back to the product's path. It's updated, our job's done. But if the operation fails, we can re-render the edit screen along with any error messages from the validation. So even for a more involved action here, this is still small and understandable. And that's because we push as much logic as we can deeper into our app. And it means we get to focus here on the HTTP concerns only. So let's go that step deeper now and look at this update operation. But first, just a note on structure. For our actions, we've been keeping everything together underneath this top-level actions folder. This is because the actions form a cohesive layer within our app. They're the entry points, the only part handling this job of HTTP, so it makes sense for them to stay together. On the other hand, for our domain layer, we can organize by concept or concern. So here we'll create a top-level products directory and matching Ruby namespace. This will provide a home for any product-related functionality within our app. So we can put our operation here to start with, but this can grow to contain more as our app evolves. And here we are at that operation now. And once again, we start with a couple more dependencies. In this case, we're bringing in a validation contract for the product, as well as that repo we created earlier. This object is callable, with the call method here being its only piece of public API. And then the first thing we do inside is we validate those product attributes by running them through that contract. And what we're doing here is the kind of attribute validation that you'd expect to see attached to a database model in a Rails app. But here, we're doing it on a standalone object, which means we get to tailor the validation for each specific use case across our app. And by keeping it separate from the concerns of database persistence, we get to use them in a range of different places and much more easily test our validation logic along the way. Now, we won't visit this contract in detail here, but it's built using the dry validation gem, if you'd like to learn more. This is a standalone gem. We're using it here in Hanami, but you can drop it into any Ruby app. So now, if those attributes are valid, we can move on. We'll update the product via the repo, and then return that product as a success. Otherwise, we consider this a failure and pass those validation errors back to the caller. Now, what we see in success and failure here are two sides of a result object. This creates a wrapper over our specific return values, and it means the caller has to consider both the success and failure cases every time. Now, this is great for consistency, but it also gives us wins for expressiveness as well, because it was this result that enabled the modern Ruby case statement with pattern matching back in the action. These success and failure results, in fact, this whole class is enabled by the dry operation gem. This is a brand new gem we created to release alongside Hanami 2.2 late last year. And it provides a streamlined, batteries-included experience for building classes like this. And it gives us the tools we need for these operations to remain clear and maintainable even as they grow more complex. And once again, this is a Ruby gem that you can drop into any app of any flavor. So now for our final step, we'll go one layer deeper and return to our product repo. And this should feel familiar. It's the same repo we made before. Now we'll add a method for creating and updating the products in our database. And what we're doing here is beginning the journey of defining our very own persistence API for our products. Over time, we can grow this for each distinct way we want to work with products from our database, like fetching an individual product by its ID, or a paginated collection of products within a category. And these repos can scale all the way from the simplest to the most complex query, all while using the same query API under the hood. And what this means is that these repos can serve as our single unified access layer to all our persisted data. And because we're building these repos ourselves, we're bringing intentionality to this access, because we're the ones creating their methods, we're the ones picking the meaningful names, we're the ones using those repos as dependencies wherever we need them in our app. And what this means is that we can much more effectively manage how we access our data all across our app. Now, adopting this repository pattern is one of the most impactful things I did when I was learning and seeking out a new style of Ruby app, because it has so many positive flow-on effects. And we can see one of these by looking at the objects these repos return, which is our own struct classes. These represent the various entities within our app. And the repos will pick these up when it finds a matching name, just like here with product. And these are value objects only. They're just data, nothing else, no connection back to the database, no way to trigger additional queries. And this means we can feel confident in passing them all around our app and know that things like n+1s triggered from our views are consigned to the past. And of course, inside our structs, we can expand on how we interact with our data just by defining our own methods. And every attribute we select in our query will be available for us to use, just like in this example with description. Our repos can return different kinds of structs too. All we need to do is specify the struct name in the query, and the matching class will be used. So this shows how our repos can serve as the means of decoupling our app's business layer from the details of persistence. And then as our app grows, we can really reinforce that decoupling, because we're able to create as many repos as we need for each distinct area of our business domain. And we don't have to leave everything as a simple one-to-one mapping to our underlying database tables. Now, there's only so many steps we can take walking through our code today, but if any of this is interesting to you, find me after in the party and we can chat about how things can grow from here. But by this stage, you've hopefully noticed some differences in our Hanami app compared to what you know of Rails. In Hanami, we prefer more focused classes. This means a greater number of classes overall, but also a clearer responsibility for each. And then we give you the tools in the framework to bring those focused classes together to realize your features. Every one of these components in a Hanami app is also immutable. This takes away the dimension of time from your code, and that makes each piece easier to understand, test, and compose. With Hanami, we want you to bring a greater focus to the whole of app level too. Hanami encourages you to build your app in distinct layers rather than blending things together. In Hanami apps, you'll have at very least an HTTP layer, a business layer, and a persistence layer, clearly separated. And then using slices or your own namespaces, you can create as many other layers as your app needs. All of this means you get to work within each layer with a focus on its needs alone. Hanami is also firmly of the opinion that the framework is not your app. These are separate things. We think the framework should work in service of your app rather than the other way around. Hanami routes and actions, for example, are intended to be the thinnest possible outer gateways into your app. And from there, the core business logic is yours, and it's supposed to be separate from the framework level facilities. This lets you construct it in whatever way makes sense for your domain. This is where you get to do software design, and it's in this space where I made some of my leaps as a developer over the years. And what I'm proud of is how accessible we've made this style of app today. When I started on my personal journey of Ruby discovery, it was a wilderness out there. To make an app that looked like this, I had to search far and wide, cobble things together, and even invent the pieces that were missing. But now, we've turned it into a single gem install. With one command, you can jump straight in and start playing and learning. And that brings me to the next chapter. Here we'll talk about how Hanami can bring Ruby's next evolution and why I think it's essential. It might be easy to look at this Ruby that I've just shared, especially with Hanami presenting as a full stack framework, and see all of this as in opposition to Ruby on Rails. But like the race we've just run, I don't see this in terms of direct competition. I don't see Hanami and Rails as a black and white thing or an either or thing. I see it as a yes and thing. So many of our gems, and we saw some of them there, can slot straight into Ruby on Rails apps. They can help you level up in the areas you need it most. Pull in dry operation and experiment with results as a way to combine your command objects. Play with dry validation for some advanced validation and drop it into the one or two endpoints that really need it the most. Create your own strictly typed immutable objects using the dry types and dry struct gems. We've even had someone in our community experiment with mounting entire Hanami slices inside Rails apps, and it works. But we're here for more than just Rails though. We want to elevate all of Ruby. Just like Murakami felt a kinship with his fellow runners on the course, we feel the same about our fellow Rubyists. These are our people, and we want to lift them up. We want our tools to work together with Ruby apps and Ruby gems of all kinds. So this is why Hanami is okonomi. That is the Japanese for as you like it. The choice is yours. This philosophy is at the core of everything we do. With Hanami, you do have a cohesive, batteries-included framework as a starting point, yes, but it's built on top of all those gems that are themselves independently useful, and Hanami itself is designed to let you remove pieces or replace them with things that you want. So your app can be exactly as you like it. And we want more of this. So I want to share some examples now of this okonomi Ruby I want to foster. Let's take a look at a few of my favorite Ruby gems. The first is Rhoda, a routing tree web toolkit from Jeremy Evans. And a Rhoda routing tree looks something like this. It's a series of nested blocks that consume the segments of your request path, where you can run your own code along the way, until eventually you reach a block that returns your response. Now, this routing tree is an incredibly clever idea, and I can see how it just might click with so many people's brains. Well, if Rhoda is your jam, you can use it with Hanami too. With a small Rhoda plugin, we can have it entirely replace Hanami's router and actions. We can have Rhoda render Hanami views and even resolve components from our Hanami containers. And afterwards, we can use them just like we would anywhere else in a Hanami app. So that's Rhoda, an alternative spin on routing. And if you want to use it with Hanami, the choice is yours. And now we have an alternative spin on views, which is Flex by Joel Draper. Flex lets you author your views entirely in Ruby. using a block-based API for constructing the markup. And with Flex, you get to use Ruby across even more layers of your app. And this approach means Flex can also offer features like HTML-aware structural safety, which hasn't been possible to do inside template-based views. So if Flex sounds like your style of views, you can use it with Hanami too. In fact, Pavel Shvontkovsky has been doing this very thing for years already inside his own open source Hanami app, Palava. This is how Pavel's Hanami actions look. Instead of rendering Hanami views from here, Pavel renders a Flex component directly with a top-level component representing each screen across the app. And while we're here, I want to point out this really interesting pattern that Pavel has developed. Here he uses dedicated query objects built on top of the Hanami repos to provide the data for each of those specific Flex views. This is a great example of the kind of flexibility Hanami gives you to arrange your code in the way that makes the most sense for your domain and technical structure. And even with these two changes, with Flex for views and with this query object pattern, this still feels very much like a Hanami app with small, focused actions and a clear flow of data. So if you want to use Flex with Hanami, the choice is yours. Now here you might be thinking, yes, so Ruby works with Ruby. What's really the big deal? But what I haven't shared are the thousands of Ruby gems that exist as Ruby on Rails plugins alone. Rubyists using other frameworks can't access their functionality. I want to help Hanami change the picture here, and we're lucky to have a couple good examples to follow. The first is Rodauth, another Jeremy Evans special. Jeremy calls it Ruby's most advanced authentication framework, and if Jeremy says something, I'm inclined to believe him. What's special about Rodauth is that it's built on top of Rhoda, and this makes it uniquely flexible. With just 2 lines added to a standard Rodauth setup, we can turn it into a rack middleware that we can mount in our Hanami app, and then we can expose it to the rack environment. And what this means is that we can now use Ruby's most advanced authentication framework directly inside our Hanami actions. Next, we have Shrine by Janko Marinic, and this is a Ruby gem for handling file uploads. Rails developers here might turn to Active Storage or older Rails plugins like Carrierwave or Paperclip, and Jess has a to-do to remove one of them from her app. Now, what I like about Shrine, though, is that while it does support Rails, it's framework agnostic. Shrine, in fact, ships with support for a multitude of persistence libraries and frameworks. It has an adapter-oriented architecture. So thanks to Shrine, if I use a non-Rails framework, I still have access to best-in-class file upload support. This is a big deal. Janko didn't have to build Shrine like this. He could have built it for Rails and found himself a good many users. But instead, he made the righteous choice to enhance the entire Ruby ecosystem. And I love this because I love Ruby. And because I love Ruby, I love Shrine, Rodauth, Flex, and Rhoda. I think gems like these and the people behind them represent the very best of Ruby. They push boundaries, they explore novel approaches, they let us see and use Ruby in new ways, and they do it in a way that lifts up Ruby apps of all kinds. In fact, Rhoda was my own personal gateway when I was seeking this new style of Ruby. It was the first tool that I picked up on my path towards Hanami. So Hanami isn't the only example of Okonomi Ruby out there. There are at least a few other folks, maybe black sheep like me, who care about the same things. And this kind of Okonomi Ruby I love to see. But as much as I love Ruby, I also worry about Ruby. I worry about Ruby because Ruby is like our knees. Murakami's memoir takes a startling turn when at one point, all of a sudden, his right knee buckled while he was walking down some stairs. And he couldn't put any kind of weight on it. And for someone who lives to run, this was a grave development. And it made Murakami pause and give serious thought to his knees for the first time. And he reflected, you can replace your breath any number of times, but not your knees. These are the only knees I'll ever have, so I'd better take good care of them. So when I worry about Ruby's knee health, I worry about Ruby's diversity, or perhaps its lack of it. Now, I'd hope we all know why diversity is important, because the science on this has been very settled for some time. Here's Catherine Phillips on a now 15-year-old study. She says, diversity enhances creativity, it encourages the search for novel information and perspectives, and it leads to better decision-making and better problem-solving. All good things. So let's try some of our own little pseudoscience here. I want you to raise your hand here if you're paid to work with Ruby. All right, makes sense? But now keep your hand up. No, keep them up, keep them up. Keep your hand up if your paid Ruby work involves a stack that is not Ruby on Rails. Yeah, not many of us. And see, the truth is, we're a pretty lopsided community. We could call it a monoculture. And I mean, hey, maybe that's not a problem for Ruby. Here we are at the second glorious event of Baltic Ruby, and we've shared so many great ideas here. But monoculture does pose risks out in the world in many places. Due to monoculture, we completely lost the world's default banana to root disease in the 1950s. And a little closer to home, when Internet Explorer completely dominated the web, we lost a decade of progress and innovation. And how did IE get to this position? Well, at the beginning, by being a good and free technology choice. And well, we have a single good and free technology choice within Ruby too. But when we lack diversity around it, we for sure miss out on something, and we just can't see what it might be. So let's say I came to the Ruby community today, brand new, fresh eyes, and took a look at the culture that I saw. Well, what I think I'd see is a little too much gravity behind a single Ruby orthodoxy. That's no moon. Ruby on Rails is as popular as it is for good reason, and I am a beneficiary of it as much as any of you. But if you zoom out, it's kind of the only show in town. And it does continue to evolve, but it's mature, which means its direction is already set, and there are certain parts of it that just feel immovable at this point. And I think that has a chilling effect on a certain kind of Ruby creativity. So then if I continue to look at Ruby as a newcomer with fresh eyes, well, what I might also see is a high-level leader or two whose values are at odds with much of the community, and certainly at odds with mine. And I think if that was the whole story, and if I was coming to that Ruby today, brand new, then maybe I'd bounce back off. Maybe I would go use Elixir. But this is not the whole story, and I'm not coming to Ruby today. I'm already here. So instead, I've been building a quiet little rebellion against the orthodoxy. You've just seen what it looks like in Hanami. I'm working to create a world where frameworks like Hanami are no longer considered outside the mainstream. Instead, I want to expand the mainstream. I want to create another center of gravity within Ruby, one that encourages a pluralistic community, where gems like Rodolph and Shrine, as we saw, become the norm. And together we lift up Ruby styles and Ruby apps and Ruby people of all kinds. This will lower the barrier to even more experimentation across Ruby, and it will help more people find their true homes in the community. And right now in my rebellion, I'm forming an alliance. With an alliance, we can be better seen and heard and better build our vision of a more diverse Ruby. So when we built our Hanami app earlier, we did so with the support of numerous dry libraries and a database layer powered by ROM. And it's in these three projects that we have our alliance. They fit together exceedingly well. They offer outstanding breadth, from focused libraries to a powerful persistence toolkit, all the way through to a complete framework. And for a while now, it's been the same team maintaining all of these. So this year, we're bringing them together. We're rebooting our projects and revitalizing them for the future. Hanami, Dry, and ROM are each here to stay, but from now on, they'll be part of a new family. We're calling it Hanakai. This is our new gathering of Hanami, Dry, and Rom. And you are the first people on Earth to be hearing about it, because we're still some weeks away from a proper announcement. But I couldn't pass up this opportunity to share it with you today. I'm very excited for it. And after this talk is done, I'd love to hear what you think. Come find me. Thank you. So with the Hanami name, we're continuing in the spirit of nature and community that we had with Hanami. Hanami in Japanese means a party of flowers. And with Hanami, we're gathering our blossoms together, Hanami, Dry, and Rom, and we invite you to join in too. Because we want to help your Ruby bloom. With Hanami, or with Hanami, you can elevate your apps from drop-in gems to the full framework experience we just saw. With Hanami, I think you can elevate your own skills too, because it helps you experience a different style of code. This blending of functional and object-oriented styles with clear separations of concern and clear flows of data. And with Hanami, we hope to elevate the Ruby community at large by creating this center of gravity that encourages people to see Ruby in a new light. So this is the start of a new era for us, and I'm very excited for it. Especially this delightful, welcoming new face we'll get to present to the world. And I'd like to thank my teammate and friend Aaron Moody for his work on our new visuals. But there's still a lot to do to make it happen. So we've got some clear goals for the coming year, and I want to share them with you now. The first is to establish this new unified community, this gathering of Hanami, Dry, and Rom. We've already unified a number of spaces. We have a single chat. Soon we'll merge our forums. And we're also building a great new website that'll bring the resources for all these tools into a single place. We'll also be focusing on making it clearer and easier for new contributors to come to our projects. So if you've been looking for a way to contribute to Ruby open source, well, we have a lot of opportunity here for you. And we're being very intentional in this evolution of our community. We're leading with our values. More than anything, we want Hanami to be a welcoming place for those who bring kindness, curiosity, and care. A place where people of all backgrounds and experience levels can feel respected and can share and grow together. A place people can feel proud of, and a place people can feel safe within. So this means that we're being also clear on what we won't tolerate, which is why we're also putting these words alongside those up front on our website and in all our community spaces. We won't tolerate in our community Nazis, transphobes, racists, or bigotry of any kind. This is not a radical position, but I think we could all be a lot clearer about this. We're here for people before technology. So for our second goal, we want to help those people become more successful with our tools. For the last 5 years, our team has had our heads down, diligently building this entire app development experience I got to share with you today. This culminated with the release of Hanami 2.2 late last year. So now it's time for us to lift our heads up and consolidate on everything we built and to make it as accessible and as approachable as we can. So our focus now is to improve our docs, our guides, examples, and the overall developer experience. And once again, this is another opportunity for people to get involved. Someone who tries something out and finds a way to improve our documentation is an immensely valuable contribution. And when it comes to code, I hope our next push can also include a language server as well. Now, to understand our third and final goal, can we give a bit of jazzy background music for this part? Yeah, that's it. For our third and final goal, we need to visit another time in the life of our guide, Murakami. One that even predates his time as a runner. Before Murakami became a novelist, he spent 7 years running a jazz bar in Tokyo. He and his wife hated the idea of having to fit into the system of orthodoxy. So in 1974, they took their own path and opened up this bar, even before they graduated from university. They had records playing constantly and young musicians performing live jazz on the weekends. This sounds like a wonderful space, and I kind of wish I could go back in time and experience it. But for the two of them, it was certainly hard work. And it was while he owned this bar that Murakami decided to write his first novel. To do it, he would spend 1 to 2 hours writing on his kitchen table every night after closing up the bar. He had to write in spurts, snatching bits of time here and there, competing against the clock. And when he recalled this time, Murakami said, "I felt like I was living enough for 2 people's lives." And then he did it all over again for his second novel. And it was only after that he finally decided to shut the bar down. This was not the environment to produce the profound or complex novels he would come to be known for. Running this bar and writing on the side is where I've been and where Hanakai has been for our last decade. It's been nights and weekends the whole time. And like Murakami, I know I need a change to make all of this more sustainable, to create the environment to build even better things. So that's why our third and final goal is to fundraise for the sustainable maintenance of Hanakai. We spent the last 10 years creating this comprehensive ecosystem. Now we need your help to take it to the next level. We need you and your businesses to become Hanakai patrons. Our goal is to start paying the people who build Hanakai. We'll start at just 1 day a week, just 1 day. First from me, and then if we can, from Sean Collins, my teammate on the core team. Now, as a first target, this is modest, but we think it'll have a big impact on our project and on our people, and we think it's achievable. To achieve this, we need to raise $70,000 a year ongoing, and we're already off to a good start. We've hit $27,000 already, and it's thanks to these founding patrons. So I'd like to say thank you to Sidekick, to Honey Badger, to Fast Ruby, to AppSignal, and one Brandon Weaver. We'd really love you and your businesses to join them as founding patrons of Hanakai. And as Marty shared, I'd also like to thank Ruby Central for their support because they're acting as our fiscal host for these business patrons. Ruby Central is helping ensure more of the funds reach our hands within our project. So we've launched our public fundraising drive just last week. It's live on sponsor.hanamirb.org. We have opportunities for businesses as well as individuals at all different levels of funding. And we'll be sharing a bunch of interesting stuff over the following weeks. So follow us on Mastodon or Blue Sky to keep up with it all. Now, while I think it's fantastic that we've made this start and we have a few big Ruby names already behind us, we still have some way to go. So please check this out, share it with your friends, and consider how you might help. Your support would mean the world to us, and you can help us build a better Ruby. That's what we're here for after all. I want to make Ruby better because I love Ruby. We have just one Ruby. Ruby is our knees. We need to take care of it. On the surface, Murakami's memoir is about his life as a runner and its connection to his life as a novelist. At a deeper level, though, it's a quiet but powerful meditation on his acceptance of his individuality and his embrace of his individual purpose. On the topic of his writing, Murakami writes, "I never had ambitions to be a great writer. I just wanted to write something that was mine and that no one else could write." And on the topic of his running, he said, "I didn't start running because somebody asked me to become a runner, just like I didn't become a novelist because somebody asked me to. One day, out of the blue, I wanted to write a novel. And one day, out of the blue, I started to run simply because I wanted to. I've always done whatever I felt like doing in life." So what do I talk about when I talk about Ruby? Well, I want a Ruby where we reduce the barriers to people simply doing what they want to do, being their true selves, writing the Ruby only they could write. With the Ruby language, we're already blessed with something that supports all kinds of expression. And what I hope for us to do now is to match that as much as possible with the community and the ecosystem we build around it. I want us to create a more diverse Ruby, both socially and technically. Matt calls the community Ruby's most precious jewel. And on this, our 30th anniversary, he's right to celebrate everything we've achieved. And through greater diversity, we can continue to nourish this community. A more diverse Ruby can keep more of our people here in the community because they can find the tools and the groups that suit the way they want to work. A more diverse Ruby can also attract more people and grow our community because we can offer a wider range of options and meet people where they are on their personal journeys. Together, we can make a home for the sheep of all colors. And I'm glad I get to be sharing this in Riga because this right here is what peak performance looks like from a diverse community. Capybaras, lemurs, dogs, and cats working together, bringing to the group what only they could bring. And if you haven't seen the movie Flow, I heartily recommend it. So on my personal journey, it was those 10 years ago in 2015 when I discovered my place, my purpose within Ruby's diversity. This is when I finally discovered the Ruby that truly suited me as a person, the Ruby that I wanted to do for the long run. And once Murakami found writing, he took up his long runs so he could live and write for longer. For me, once I found that kind of Ruby, I started building Hanami so I can write and see more of that Ruby in the world. Just like running marathons, this is work that requires persistence. I know that, and some days I truly feel it too. But Murakami put it well. He said, pain is inevitable. This is probably something that resonates with Adam. But suffering is optional. Things become easier when you feel that connection to purpose. I've been doing this now for 10 years, and with your help, I'm ready to do it for as long as I can. And Murakami is a worthy role model here, not just for me, but I think for all of us, because he's still running every single day, well into his 70s, and he's made it past 40 marathons across his life. Now, I've never run a marathon myself, and hey, maybe I'll be inspired to after this talk, but even without that experience, I completely understand Murakami when he describes a good run as being contagious. In my case, it was only after striking out on a new direction that I truly started learning and getting the most from my work with Ruby. Everything started falling into place from there. Ruby changed me, and in turn, I changed Ruby too. And what we see in the Hanami project is a result of this. And my hope is that we can now help others forge their own directions too and create a more interesting, more diverse Ruby for all of us. So this has been my journey, part of my own memoir, the path that I followed and where I want to go in the future. And as we wrap up this conference and we all go our separate ways, full of ideas and inspiration, I'd love for you to take a moment and ask yourself, what's the path that you want to take in Ruby? What is it that only you can do? And if you think of something, I'd love to hear from you. Please send me an email. My contact details are on my site there. And if the path you'd like to take overlaps with ours, please check out Hanami. Whether you want to try it, contribute to it, or even provide financial support, we'd love to hear from you. So to Sergey and Ali and all the Baltic Ruby organizers, thank you for bringing me all the way here to Riga. It's been a fantastic time. To all of you, thank you for coming and thank you for hearing what I talk about when I talk about Ruby.